Withdrawal Planning Committee. Mrs. Belcher, could you take the roll, please?
Sabrina Alberg.
Here.
Ken Farah.
Here.
John Hughes.
Here.
Barbara Kiska.
Here.
Earl Metzler. Mark Sherwood.
Here.
Jennifer Silva.
Here.
Karen Steele.
Thank you. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Sabrina, you want to lead us? Going on with you?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to comments from the public. Mrs. Springer?
Thank you. I'm Mary Ann Springer from Danville. I have two students who one is just about to graduate from Timberlane, the other graduated last year. So thank you for your diligent work gathering the materials so quickly for informing this committee's work. I missed the first meeting, but I was very impressed last week with the amount of material you had already gathered and reviewed for the second meeting. Part of the meeting discussion late in the May 7th meeting concerned whether or not the Timberlane district had experienced any ill effects of membership in the SAU. Having attended the subsequent SAU board meeting last week, it provided obvious evidence that the SAU board is not functioning at this time. I was also concerned during the last meeting because it appeared that there was a possibility that this committee might decide not to proceed with developing a detailed plan at some point soon. I urge the committee not to make this decision in a single meeting. If members of the committee feel there are reasons not to proceed with a detailed withdrawal plan, I'd request that you list those reasons publicly during one meeting and then schedule a vote for a later meeting so members of the public would have an opportunity to speak and provide input. But mostly I wanted to come tonight and thank you for your efforts and your willingness to fully examine the advisability of Timberlane's possible withdrawal from the SAU. So thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, review of the minutes from the May 7th meeting. Is there a motion?
I motion we accept the minutes from May 7th.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. I'd like to make some amendments to the minutes, or
I forgot my marker. Darn it.
is it okay?
Oh, yes. No, I forgot my marker.
Oh, okay, I didn't know what you said.
Changes. No.
Okay,
No,
You need a
all right.
marker?
no, that's okay.
On the second paragraph from the bottom, the second line from the bottom, it says, "He spoke to payroll and staffing."
Second line on the bottom.
No, the second paragraph, on the first page,
Okay.
the second paragraph from the bottom.
Okay.
The second line from the bottom of the end of that paragraph where it says, "He spoke to payroll and staffing." Explaining the difficulties associated, so
The last sentence.
the last sentence in that, Kathy, right here, down,
First page.
right
fine.
here, right
Oh,
here.
first page. I thought you said the second page.
Sorry,
second
it was the
paragraph.
sorry.
Okay, yes. All right. He spoke to payroll staffing, explaining the difficulties. Got it.
He, I think here refers to the superintendent, not the business administrator, right? Am I remembering, I think, because the superintendent spoke to staffing, explaining the difficulties of separating, and his,
I can make sure that you want me to indicate that that was a superintendent. who
yes,
spoke
please,
to
because
that?
before
Yeah.
that pronoun, the last person mentioned was Mr.
Yeah,
Dowd, and
okay.
this is the superintendent.
Yep, sure, happy to do that.
Thank you. And then the other comment I had,
I think Jeff also discussed it as well,
well,
so.
So he should be they?
No, I'm just.
well, I would say, let's put the
Yeah.
superintendent and Mr. Dowd so it's clear, because I think they both, the
Right.
superintendent definitely spoke to
Right, and I
staffing.
think Jeff as well when we
Jeff
asked him, so
spoke
I
to
think.
paper, so can we just put the superintendent and Mr. Dowd there? Yeah. And then on the second page, and I'm not trying to nitpick here, but if we move forward, I think it would be helpful for us in our recollections. On the fifth line down, it says members also, that line, it said there being virtually no SAU assets. Could we add, with the exception of a recently purchased fingerprint machine?
Yep.
Just so it will refresh us, should we be writing what the assets are? And then the last comment, give me a second there. on the motion, further down on that page, that was Mrs. Steele that made that motion? Not me?
Okay. Got it.
All the changes I see. Do we need to make an amendment, or can we
No,
move to
I'm fine
approve?
with.
Everybody
approving them as
okay with
corrected.
approving the minutes as amended or adjusted? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
I guess we can raise our hand here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6-0. Okay, thank you. Moving on. I guess, Mr. Dowd, you are up with the current SAU budget, pro forma budget.
Oh, good evening. So in front of you, I believe that you'll have a now landscape-oriented budget, which I believe, and we spoke about certain changes, and I don't know, I hope that I've captured them accurately. Certainly I tried to. I think there was a request to carry the budget out a couple more years, in addition to that which was already included. So you can see that I've carried it out from the original pro forma, if you will, of 1920 to 20 to 21, 21 to 22. And in addition to that, we spoke about looking at some of the loss of revenue or loss of income items and prorating it to reflect that which is not going to be returned from Hampstead at this point. So I think I've gone through and made those adjustments accordingly. You'll see the budget numbers from pro forma have been adjusted down, and in subsequent years they have also been adjusted to reflect the carry forward. I think the biggest one of the biggest differences in years 21 to 22. There are some drop-offs from contractual obligations. So let's take a look at that.
I have an extra one.
The only pocket I didn't check was in.
Oh, sorry, Barbara, I wasn't sure if Jeff was done. Was that all, were you?
I'm done, yeah.
Were you done? I just
Yeah.
wasn't sure, I was,
Take a look, and as we go through it, I can reflect where I've made, made some adjustments in those lines as we get to them. I don't know if you wanted to go through it, or...
that is what it's gonna cost us if we, so, I'll get your question, Barbara. Jen's asking a question, so, based on.
I'm just, I don't know why, I'm just
you
drawing a
you-
blank. All of a
This
sudden.
2 points in pro forma budget 1920, you're showing that if we are a standalone SAU, based on what our current contractual obligations are, that it would be costing us 2.6 million roughly, versus what we are now contributing, which is approximately 1.6 million. So you're saying it would cost us an extra million?
Correct.
Should we withdraw?
Correct.
Now, was that your question? Is it?
Those numbers don't really make sense to me, but
Well,
okay.
I think I'm gonna try to parse why those numbers don't make sense.
Okay, that would be
But
helpful.
Barbara, why don't I give you a chance first?
Oh, well, I was just gonna start asking a few questions, but I think you probably have a more orderly approach.
I don't know.
Go right
You want,
ahead.
you want me to go ahead first?
We'll vote on that after.
Okay. One thing that I did find out, or maybe, I think it was Sabrina, somebody was tasked to see if there would be a cost if the SAU was, Sabrina, were you able to find out if a separate audit would be needed for the standalone school district?
I couldn't find something that was a separate audit, but it looked like you just maintained the current audits, unless I'm incorrect. You've maintained the current structure of the audits that we have, and that is with the, let me see if I can find my page here.
And there were some other SAUs that were standalone, as it were, and they had in their annual expenses audit as well. So don't know that it's required, but
Yeah, it's basically
They're
accounted,
doing it.
doing audits for, any state, federal, local funding, grants, attendance, budget, student activities, procurement, nepotism, government, funds and proprietaries, all those things were things that they were saying to continue audits on, and also for the local taxpayers to show them where the money's going as well.
So who was saying that?
That was just like different research from the different websites. I looked at one for Salem, I looked at one on the DOE, and then I also looked at, there was a federal website I can pull up the link for that I looked on, and it was school audits, and it was basically standalone versus SAUs.
So would it be safe to say that it's not we don't know whether it's a requirement, yet it seems to be a standard practice?
A standard practice,
Well,
I would say, from what I saw.
I did check the RSAs on this, and I didn't make a copy, but I'll certainly get it out to the committee. RSA 194, I think it is, speaks to audits of standalone SAUs, and there's no requirement for a standalone SAU to have an audit. So should we move to a standalone SAU, that $8,000 for that audit should be coming off the budget?
I'm not sure if there would be an incremental cost, but again, the purpose of my putting this together is to do exactly what we did, to understand and have the discussion on those matters. I'm happy to remove it altogether, or.
So I think that should be removed. I will certainly get the committee the RSA. I didn't have time to print it off, but I did review the RSA, and there's no single district SAUs are not required to have an audit, because that audit would just be the district.
It may not be a requirement, but I wonder if our transparency and, for the good of the taxpayers, there's a reason why other standalone schools do it, not because they necessarily have money to burn, but granted, I only looked at 3, and they all did it, and they were standalone. I'm thinking there's a reason other than, just wanting to burn
A
money.
lot of it is too, like I said, a standard practice for like taxpayers and accountant fee money and any grants and stuff like that we may have. But did you say RSA, what, 194, what was the?
I don't have it in front of me. I'll get it. I didn't
I
have
had
not,
part of 194 here, that's what.
I didn't have time to print it off. So that's the answer to one of the questions, that it's not required. Jen?
So when you said you looked at some of the single district SAUs were doing 2 audits?
No.
No, I didn't say 2.
Oh, okay, so that's what
That's what we're talking about.
So do we need an audit for Timberlane and an audit for the SAU? 2 separate audits in the same year?
No, it was a standard practice.
So that's what we're talking about, removing that
Yes.
from the SAU line because it's already built into the
Understood.
Timberlane line.
Gotcha.
Understood.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
yep, same
Yeah,
page
yeah.
now.
I think, I
Same
think.
page.
Okay,
so we
It's
can
an
take that
understanding
out.
why
I was hearing,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think the
okay.
conversation just spun.
Yeah.
two
Okay,
different
yeah, no,
directions.
Timberlane would still do their audit. That cost would
Gotcha.
still be into that budget, but there would be no
The
SAU audit. So I would say we could safely remove 8,000 from this budget, pro forma budget. So that was one thing in terms of the budget.
Can I just, are we all on the same page with that?
Is everybody in agreement with that now? Does
Absolutely.
that make
Yep.
sense, John?
That makes sense.
Yeah? You
Yeah,
good?
yeah, so I saw that as well in the RSA after we had a discussion the other day, so. Yeah, we still need to audit our books if our finances are done at the, district level. Then there's no reason to have it unless you have finances separate at the SEU and you had funds that were done specifically by them. But I think one audit, one district. Most of these single district SAUs, they don't even designate that between SAU and district. It's, some of them you go to the SAU site and it's the school, one of the schools, so like Fremont.
Back to the
it's-
library, right.
You go to Ellis School for the SAU, for Fremont. So it becomes no designation really between SAU and district at that
Well,
level.
what would the line be on that as far as finances, where we wouldn't, because obviously the SAU would have some sort of expenses, correct?
Coming out of our budget.
It would be in our budget, and they would do that, probably audit as part of our audit.
Yeah. If you look at their budgets, there's no designation, there's superintendent services built into the regular district budget. There's not even a separate budget. Here we have it because we voted for a separate budget, but it could be part of, it would just be part of the district budget.
Gotcha.
And does it cover the government grant and, I'm sorry, Jen.
No, I was just going to say a good example of of how it would look. So right now, the Timberlane budget has a line for, Jeff, chime in if I'm not, if I'm misspeaking here, but the Timberlane budget has a line for the retirement health insurance. The SAU budget also has a line for retirement health insurance.
It'll be one.
It would, bingo, it would all be one.
Well, yes, but there would be additional expense in the example
Right.
you gave.
I mean, the number might be different, but it would all be built into one budget.
It could be consolidated, yeah, into one budget,
So it wouldn't, right.
And that's sort of the issue that in presenting this, what's the net impact to Timberlinks? We talk about, an SAU, a separate SAU standalone budget, what's it going to look like, what are the costs going to be? Really, it's what the additional or incremental expense is going to be to the Timberlane Regional School District, right? So it probably would be good to have a discussion as to what if that's what it is. We're used to looking at the SAU budget in this format as a standalone budget, but realistically, it's ultimately, if it were to roll into the Timberlane budget, audit, yeah, you might have an incremental expense. I don't know, it might be $1,000 or $2,000 more, maybe not. It doesn't have to be $8,000. But really, what is that going to be? Because your audit line on the Timberlane Regional School District side probably wouldn't change dramatically by merging it, if you will, with what we would now know as the SAU line.
Right. So I think it's fair to say that we'll make the assumption that the audit line goes down to zero. Let's just it's only $8,000. It's not a lot of money. Moving down here, when you look at the 2,900 lines, and you start into 211, 225, which is employment insurance, sick leave redemption. Actually, not the insurance. That's a straight edge here. The employee insurance, sick leave redemption, employee retirement, Social Security, unemployment compensation. That's zero anyway. When I look at that, one of the things that we had asked for. Well, no, let me not get ahead of myself. One thing here that when I look out into the out years, we know that we're losing two large contractual obligations after year 2021. I don't see that reflected in reductions here in those numbers.
Those reductions are reflected on the second page as an offset or an addition. So you'll see the total cost for those, particularly where it says the 76.17%. You'll see that those go from 301,000 to 129,000.
Okay, I see that back there. Okay, but back to those lines, one of the things that we requested last time, and I did send the superintendent and Mrs. Belcher an email of this, is we wanted the breakdown per SAU employee for the last 4 years on the salaries, the bonus, the dollars unpaid vacation, dollars unpaid sick time, dollars unpaid comp time, sick leave redemption, comp time redemption, and other employee benefits over 4 years. But part of the reason that we're looking not only at the static current and the future, we're taking a look back so we can make a projection as to what the SAU budget is going to look like based on trends. So were you not able to get that, or can we have that?
So what I did provide was the number of all of those combined to go in on an employee by employee basis and reconcile them out on a position level is quite a bit of work. And quite frankly, what we were able to extract here and confirm, we were able to. If we have to go in and do additional data mining to get that, it'll just take additional time, that's all. You can appreciate the workload that the office has, updating a budget, getting this out on short notice.
Okay, so you were aware of the request, you didn't have the time to do it?
We got this out with certainty, and that request came in subsequent. We have in front of us is confirmed, gone through, vetted for the time periods that we were able to pull the data.
Okay, so what's the time frame that the committee could get that information?
When your next meeting?
The 28th.
I think we'd have it by then.
Okay. Jen?
I'm just going back I'm sorry if I'm just not remembering this, but our current SAU budget is just over $2 million. And then the standalone is $2.7 million. So if Timberlane were to absorb all of the current costs of the current SAU, that would be $2 million. So what is the other $727,000?
So I don't make assumptions on the part of this withdrawal committee. That's going to be, certain assumptions in this budget are going to be your work, if you will. So I've taken and modeled what we have in terms of staffing, salary levels, and that sort of thing, and just included it here. And said, if you were to break away, the only assumption I think that I did make is that perhaps the business operations coordinator would either be a finance director or an assistant business administrator. That is the best that I can glean, guess, however you want to put it. So in addition to the current staffing, I've included a facilities director, which is on the second page, along with associated benefits. We also have an SAU building receptionist who is now receiving a contribution from Hampstead. So now Timberlane would absorb all of that
But
cost.
isn't that included in this $2 million budget that we already have this year?
No, because that employee is half Timberlane.
But
and
the
half
total
SAU.
SAU budget is $2 million.
Right.
So, well, for example, if you want to take a look at the salaries sheet,
The 1718?
The green lines on it?
Yeah.
you'll see that at the bottom of that, I think in red, hopefully it's in red, it says salary 50/50 SAU
Yeah.
TRSD, 21,000. Well, there's an additional 21,000 that's paid on that directly by Timberlane.
Right, but what Jen is saying is, so
If I look at,
there's the 21,000 that Timberlane's paying.
Yeah,
Then there's another 21,000,
yep,
okay? You were saying that we're gonna end up paying, you're adding 23% of that to our additions to our budget should we withdraw, but that number is already in the salaries of 1.069 million.
no, if you look at that salary sheet, that 21,000 is what's in there.
let me ask it another way. Every salary position on the salary sheet, is this included in the current SAU budget total?
Yes,
Okay. So our current total SAU budget is $2,086,622. And that includes all of these positions.
correct.
So then I don't understand why we would add another 21,000 if it's already included in this.
It's not, only half of it is. Can I try?
Please.
Okay. The reason is that you've got an employee upstairs who's paid half by SAU and half by Timberlane. That position doesn't go away. So the SAU portion still needs to be paid unless you're going to cut that position by half and only have a half-time secretary upstairs. Either way, it's still a whole position that needs to be funded because that position is not one that will go away. That's the one that's going to answer your door and answer your phone and be available during the office hours.
Oh, I
So
understand.
that salary has to be
Absolutely.
accounted for completely, whether it's half SAU or half Timberlane or all of Timberlane. Her gross pay, her gross salary needs to be paid by whoever's keeping her.
Okay.
Right now, it's just shared.
Okay, I get it. So,
Is that
right now we
helpful?
have 14 employees, or maybe, I guess, 13 and a half, right? Because,
I don't know the number.
is it 13.5 because
fair way
that
to
person is half Timberlane,
Correct.
right? Is that, okay, let's say we have 13.5 employees. Jen, what this is doing is adding that half back to us. So we're actually moving up to 14 employees. My whole problem with this pro forma budget, which was why I was not happy that it was put out, is this pro forma budget is assuming that we're staying at 14 employees should we withdraw. Plus, it's also making the assumption, right, wrong, or indifferent, that we're gonna still have these contractual obligations,
Some of which expire in
some of which
20
expire in
19.
2021.
2021.
Well, some of which expire in 2019. So,
But he
this
has
is,
to put those out, and then you're going to go through them and decide which ones you're going to need or not. He can't assume that you're going to have 10 employees or 9 employees. So he's got to put the whole thing together, and then you go through and say, we'll take that one out because we only plan on this many.
I understand
So I
that.
don't-
No, I understand
okay.
that, but when the general public sees this, they say, wow, Timberlane's gonna have to kick in another 1.5 million to the SAU.
Well, this is just the work product to get to the final one.
And that
Again.
might be for the first transition year, because at some point, we're gonna have to create a new SAU, we're gonna have to put people in that and pay them while we're still utilizing the current SAU to manage it until there's a cutover. Because it won't be a one-day cut where we have people that haven't been working in it, so you have to be paying them to set up the SAU. So I think there's gonna be some of this transition where we might do a contracted services to the current SAU until our SAU, and there'll be a cost to that. While we're also paying our new superintendent and any other staff at the same time. So some of that will be probably first year, and then you can cut over whatever your new SAU staff is gonna be in cost.
Well, though, we're in 1920 now, right? 1920 budget. So we won't have that additional contracted service if we left in 2021, because we still have those people under contract. They're still gonna have to support Timberlane as we withdraw, because they've contracted a service, or we've contracted a service from them, so.
Right, we have a financial obligation to that contract, but while we're setting up we're gonna have a new super with a new contract, new employees with new contracts, and they're gonna want to be paid while they're working.
I don't
be
envision
a lot
having
of
double.
overlap.
I don't
I
envision.
don't envision having a double, no.
But you would have to. There's not gonna be, I wouldn't imagine there being a very clean handoff. We are hiring someone, the super was brought up as an example, so we're on the hook contractually to pay what we've agreed to. It's not as if January 1st, he's gone, January 2nd, someone else is starting. That other person is not going to be able to hit the ground, at 60 miles an hour and take it off day one. I think that's to your point. There is going to be some overlap in these in having to pay for the same position twice during that transition period.
Is that what happens now if an employee leaves, though? We don't have an overlap.
Well, you're talking
We're
about,
looking at a whole new staff.
We're looking at a whole new SAU, so it's not as if on
Not
Monday
necessarily,
someone leaves.
not
Tuesday.
necessarily. No. That you can't, you're not making the assumption that you're looking at a whole new SAU. You have, other than these long, multi-year contracts, you have SAU staff here that are on annual contracts, and no offense to Hampstead, but they certainly are not gonna employ those 11 or 10 SAU staff. I mean, those people are probably, I'm guessing, gonna remain with the Timberlane SAU, which is 77% of the budget. I'm not saying that they would, but to say that everybody, I wouldn't wanna do that, because there's definitely, I wouldn't make that assumption you're starting with brand-new staff. I think that's unfair to the
I agree. I
current
think
staff.
any assumption we make is fraught with danger.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing the staff is following, and, if they hear we're going to go from 14 to 10, don't have to be a mathematician for some of them to say, okay, am I amongst that number? We can't guarantee that they're going to continue on either. There will be instances, for example, some of the higher paid, which I know are receiving some extra scrutiny. There's not going to be an easy transition. We're on the hook to a given date, and we're not going to be able to find a replacement. The current office vacates on Monday, we have the replacement on Tuesday. There will be some overlap, I think. So, I mean, these are some of the assumptions that they're dangerous, they will be inaccurate, but we have to make.
I mean, even if you look at the staffing number, if we look at like that group of schools that we were looking at when we were looking at like the Timberlane, the Interlakes, that group of like the 7 schools that we were looking at in the beginning, if you look at like the SAU total staff, we're still, with 14 staff members, we're still on the lower side of that.
Well, I'd beg to differ on that. Jen?
I actually pulled that out a little bit more just to look at it because I thought those numbers looked awfully high. But when when I looked at those, when I went to those websites
That's
for
in
those,
this
for
agenda
those
packet,
districts,
right?
Yes, it is.
a lot of their SAU employees are actually district employees.
Yeah.
So I pulled some of those out so that
Yeah, they
we're
were all-
comparing apples to apples.
I got them all from the DOE. I did not ferret down, it's what the DOE had reported as being.
Well, but what you have to understand is when you're, especially when you're a single district SAU, sometimes you have, say, where's an example here, of a student service coordinator, district staff at the SAU, that could be at the SAU or that could be at the district. So what Jen's trying to do is make sure that that you're separate, that you're looking in a single district SAU. You can't just look at the SAU, you have to look at the SAU and the top level staff. And so, because if you just start looking at the SAU, it gives you a skewed number, because you don't know what's in the next level, and those positions tend to move up and down within the SAU versus the district. So I think what Jen kind of parsed it out a little bit more for some of these. I don't know if you want to
Would you be
speak to
able
this.
to show us where this was? I mean, is it,
These are right on the district, on each district's website. I went to the district website and looked under their, so, the Governor Wentworth one, for example, all those on the bottom there
Yeah.
were listed as central office or SAU employees. But those are all positions that we have within the Timberlane district already. So if you're gonna compare them, you have to pull out the district ones from the SAU ones. But when you're looking at a single district SAU, it kind of all melds together. So if we went to a single district, sure, we could move and say our food services director is an SAU position. Right now, we have them split out because we have two different districts. But when you have one district, they put them all under the same central office umbrella, if you will.
so, for example, Governor Wentworth, the plant operations and maintenance supervisor, you don't have them under SAU, you have them listed as district staff?
Well, to be able to compare them to what our district versus SAU would look like. Yes.
So that's district staff at Governor Wentworth versus SAU.
Well, I mean,
They're
Governor
listed as
Wentworth, the district and SAU is the same.
Right.
So these single district SAUs, the district and the SAU is one and the same.
Right, so if the one and the same, so for governors, I guess I'm not understanding why there's a separation. I'm obviously just not following the thread here. So
So
you have
because-
staffing under SAU, then you have district staff at SAU filtered out to get to that number of 10.
So because here at Timberlane, when you look at our SAU building, we have a student services coordinator who is here at the SAU. But that is actually a district staff, that's not an SAU employee, because that person doesn't work for the SAU, they work for the Timberlane district.
So maybe another way to look at this, Mark, would be, because I'm counting, instead of looking at the SAU staff in a single district SAU, you have to look at the total staff that are district staff and the SAU staff and what their functions are and what the functions are that school district needs. So that it's the sum total of these two staffings. So when I sum these columns, Timberlane has 21, Derry has 20, Exeter has 18, Governor Wentworth has 16, Londonderry shows 21.
I can look, but does anyone know the 3991, is that the enrollment at Londonderry? I've just
Um,
looked at
I-
Well, I
have-
pulled those
I-
enrollments from Karen's big list here.
Okay, I just never looked at Londonderry, so.
I added Londonderry's in there and not Interlakes, only because we talked about last
Interlakes
meeting.
was a lot
Interlakes was
smaller.
kind of, it fit the multi-district SAU, but it didn't really match.
Londonderry I was looking at today, it's a better fit.
Londonderry's 3991.
So that's why
Actually
I,
shows Timberlane kind of low too, though. It shows 3215 for Timberlane.
yeah, so that was from this,
It's within 5 or 10%, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
what's
let
the
me,
year on that?
actually, I have another handout. This was from Karen. I didn't print it off, so I'll get it to you, Kathy, so you can put it on the website. This is it's a shorter version, I think, of what she
Because Londonderry's actually 44.
distributed.
thank you, Val.
This just has the SAU number, the SAU name, the superintendent's salary, the average teacher salary, and it has the students in the districts and how many districts there are in the SAU. Another column this one has is the superintendent's salary to the average teacher's salary. So this is U.S. News and World Report's high school rankings. So if you go down to number 42, Timberlane's ranked number 42 in here. This is, I assume, by academics. I don't know what the criteria is. Some of these rankings are a little circumspect. But Timberlane is ranked 42.
But we don't know what it's being ranked on.
No, we don't. But what we do know, if you look at the right-hand column, is that the superintendent salary to the average teacher salary is 3.04. And it also gives you the number of students. So the only other district that has a higher ratio would be Pelham on that superintendent to teacher salary.
And they're way at the bottom, too.
And, yeah, they're way at the bottom.
Yeah, these attendance numbers, it's funny, I'm just, because they don't match like the DOE.
It depends what year you're looking at. I
Okay,
mean,
'cause I'm
the
in-
DOE can be a little dated, it depends, I mean, there's,
Yeah, because I'm in
even the
18
district sometimes has a hard time,
tracking it.
they know who they have for students, but sometimes those DOE numbers just,
I think with the DOE, sometimes if you go into a specific district and you can put in for, it will show enrollment as of October of whatever year.
2018.
But when you look at the actual like published reports, the summary reports, they're almost a whole year behind. But back to this little, just a good example I just look at here. When you look at, for example,
Which sheet are you on?
this
So
one,
check
sorry,
that.
the one
She
that,
just ended.
so
John get one?
for Derry,
He did.
the director of nutrition was listed up top with SAU staff. For Timberlane, we have a food services director that's a district employee. So that's why I pulled, for Derry, I put the nutrition director under the district employee because it just to make it apples to apples. It's how to explain it. It's, if we were to go as one, like Kim said, if we were to go as one, then you would add up all of them. But if we're looking at keeping them looking at them separately because we're separately, then you want to pull them out.
that makes sense?
Yes, but there are some of them that, for example, transportation coordinator we have in Timberlane, but I don't see, and we also have it under Exeter.
Transportation coordinator is an SAU position at Timberlane.
Yep. In a Derry, it is not. In Governor Wentworth, it's not listed. Londonderry, it's not listed. Do they not have?
Well, they may not have one because by contract, our transportation contract says that the bus company is responsible for all routing. And I can tell you, I've talked to other districts, they don't have a transportation coordinator. The business administrator does the transportation coordinator with the bus company directly. So you may not have transportation coordinators in some of these districts.
Yeah, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with this because it's not completely jiving. I mean, Derry, so, what was
Well,
that?
these are
Was
all
that-
the positions that
So,
were
yeah.
pulled off of their website. So
Yeah,
it's
I
not going
gotcha.
to completely jive because
Not
they
every di-
title their positions as something
Yeah.
different and they structure their district.
Some
Yeah,
people-
no, I believe Londonderry probably has a receptionist at their SAU, but it's not listed. I mean, so something is,
But that doesn't mean that they don't have, they're a single district SAU, so the receptionist might be at the district, and they don't list that receptionist as an SAU receptionist, they list them as a district.
Some of them are in the school, so they might utilize a school front desk receptionist.
Yeah.
They have offices in
is
existing
Londonderry in
school.
the school? I'm just looking at Londonderry because we're talking about this as an example.
Well, they have two office assistants. I don't know what the job
Yeah.
functions of those two office assistant positions are.
Yeah, they don't all list, like when they list their facilities, they list the schools. They don't list, like, we have an SAU building that's on here that we have staff in,
I think too, it goes to,
right.
so.
I think too, it goes to like where you are locationally too, because I think if we took Londonderry and like we took Timberlane and you looked at like a transportation coordinator, Londonderry is a little bit more developed, we say, community-wise, than like, our district where you have like so many areas that don't have sidewalks, so many areas that, and Londonderry really doesn't have that. So I think what you're looking at when you have a transportation coordinator, when they're looking into that, and I know about, the contracts, because obviously, about how they're supposed to do it and, going back and forth. I understand that part. But I'm saying like, I think when you look in different areas, different areas may need different positions. Like we might say as Timberlane, this is something we may want to keep because of X, Y, and Z, but maybe this isn't something that we need because, and Londonderry does need it.
Well, I'm
because
not
it's just-
assuming to keep or not keep.
No,
I'm just saying what our
like,
current
'cause you had
SAU
asked about
positions
that, yeah.
are. And that these positions down here are Timberlane district positions, those are not SAU positions.
And then the corresponding positions at the other districts.
So I guess we moved.
Or add them all up together if that's an
Well,
easier way to
that
look
to
at
me
it.
It could be,
Yeah.
I mean,
Is the easier way to do
payroll's
it.
not, I mean, there are just some, obviously, there will be some positions that are amalgams in one district, but are distinct in a second. That's why I'm not, though I'm very thankful for the time you spent putting into this, I'm not certain how useful this is in comparing apples to apples, simply because, you know, I know Timberlane, where is payroll in Timberlane here?
Up top.
Admin assistant payroll, I know
several
it
of
has
them.
to be there.
Well, we,
Assistant.
so our,
I don't know.
so which position handles payroll? Is it out of, I mean, Jeff could probably answer that.
Well,
This says
No.
admin assistant.
Yeah, there's,
So
there's
there's-
an assistant,
and then
okay.
HR.
Teacher payroll, business payroll.
I think we don't want to.
Anyway, we don't need to get into the weeds.
I don't think we need to get into the weeds here, but Mark, I'm going to have to disagree with you. This is the way that you kind of have to look at it if you're a single district SAU, because depending on how the SAU is set up, some people are district staff and some are SAU staff. So I think you want to look at the amalgamation of the staffing at the top, and that gives you the idea. And the best place to go for that, really, is the district websites, because they keep those staff up to date. Sometimes DOE, I mean, it's just sometimes hard to pull things up. the
Yeah,
DOE
so I
website.
was relying on the DOE site to stratify, and so that's where I was pulling my numbers from. And
And
you
the-
know, obviously, it's,
The only reason I did that was because when I looked at this sheet that we got last
Yep.
week, and it showed Derry at 26 and Exeter at 19, those were kind of red flags for me, like, what,
Yep.
do they really have 26 SAU employees? So I went to the Derry website to see, okay, what are those 26 SAU employees that they're listing? And one of them was a math coach. So when you think about that, like, that is a district position. Yes, they have that person at the SAU because they're one district, one SAU. Their director of nutrition they have listed as an SAU employee. But for Timberlane, the SAU, because it's two districts, they're kept separate. So that's what I was attempting to do, was to figure out why those numbers looked so off.
I know Exeter is a tough one to follow, because I'm sure you saw it when you went on there, their superintendent doesn't only follow the co-op schools, but also has schools outside of the co-op. So Exeter is kind of a tough one to kind of compare to, because they got a unique situation going on.
So you're saying some of those are 0.5 instead of full?
Well, I don't know how I know, I'm talking like as the superintendent, I don't know how they break down all of their positions for Exeter, but I know their superintendent oversees Exeter Co-op, but then also some of the other schools in Exeter he oversees.
He does oversee those, but their articles of agreement are significantly different than Timberlane. So their articles of agreement give each of those towns, they each say have a school board within their own town for their elementary schools. So it is a unique situation. A co-op is going to be different than Timberlane, because we're four towns, but we're not a co-op, so.
And the Exeter equivalent would almost be if
Danville
Atkinson had its own board,
yeah.
Danville had its own board,
Yeah,
Sandown had
their
its own
own
board,
little-
and Plastow had its own board, but
So, but
anyway.
at least it's kind of, so I guess back to the pro forma budget, because we should probably discuss this a little bit more. So my issue with this is we're making the assumption that we're carrying all 14 SAU employees forward. And in the out years, not only are we carrying those people forward, but we're also paying essentially double, because you're carrying forward in year 2020 those 14 employees, plus we're having to pay 76% of the CFO's salary because they're still under contract. So that's something we have to take a look at in terms of, should the plan be written and moved forward, is when this happens because of these multi-year contractual obligations. And two, we need to look, should we move forward if this is the staffing that is going to be in the single district SAU? I would certainly say it would not. Should be, just off the top of your head, reduced by 23%. Of course, we don't really know what percent of staff is doing what work, because we weren't able to get that. And I'd also like to point out, I know Karen Steele's not here, but she did a great job. She actually shows a savings of about 531,000 after we withdraw.
Yeah, we can talk about those numbers
So,
later.
well-
I'm not certain how we cut 23%. Which one out of four of these do we X out?
Well,
So
I would have loved to have known that answer, because that was a question we asked, and we don't know, and neither does the SAU, apparently.
I guess what I'm saying,
More
so
Hampstead?
for any of these positions, are you saying the superintendent, the director, the admin assistant, the payroll should all be paid 23% less, or do we get rid of one out of four positions? I'm not disagreeing that with fewer students and a less complex organizational, that there's money to be saved. I don't disagree with that. But to say, well, you lose 23% of the students, 23% of the cost.
I was making a rather simplistic statement there, but I don't know who we're gonna lose and what percentage, or we're not just cutting people. I'm not gonna line people up and cut one out of four. I mean, that would be kind of silly, but right now, unfortunately, we've asked the question of the SAU, and we have
Yeah.
no idea. We may only be able to reduce by 20%. We may be able to reduce by 40%. I really don't know. Barbara?
Well, I don't know, Jen, are you first?
I was just gonna say, I think this committee is in a really tough position a little bit, because a lot of these questions that we have can only be flushed out by developing a plan. So, but we have to get to the point if we think if it's feasible to develop the plan, and then at some point, once we flush that out, I think we have to put that in the hands of the voters to decide, is this plan something that you want to move forward with? It just feels sometimes to me like we're talking about trying to make a decision on whether or not to move forward with a plan, but we want a plan to make that decision, which we can't get to a plan until we make that decision to make the plan.
So I kind of,
John, can we let
I-
Barbara
oh,
go
I'm sorry.
first?
Yeah.
Okay, so I did want to point out that they did provide us job descriptions, and in the job descriptions, at least one position seemed to be Hampstead and SAU specific. So there was a
What one was that?
administrative assistant.
It was one of the
Business
administrative,
payroll,
just
yeah.
a straight administrative,
And then
or
I
was it a
noticed-
payroll?
It was a payroll one. It was this one here.
Administrative assistant business / payroll.
Yeah, and it seemed to be Hampstead and SAU specific. And there were a couple of other ones that said there was a little bit of a split with Hampstead in the job description. But I noticed that one of the things said payroll stuffing. They actually were stuffing paychecks in envelopes. Is that true? Do you still
I
have
don't know
somebody-
what you're looking at.
Okay,
so-
well, there's a job description in there that says one of the,
Probably know that.
do we do our own payroll, or do we use ADP?
We do our own payroll.
So we actually are printing checks and
Could be
and
for the
stuffing them?
the tax forms that have to go out every year.
Yeah.
The insurance forms that have to go out every year under the Affordable Care Act. So there are envelope stuffing parties,
Okay.
per se. There are no party, trust me.
We knew it.
Never gonna
Knew it.
No, no party
Wild.
whatsoever, but there are where, there are some jobs like that have to be done, and they're not done with payroll on a bi-weekly basis. They might be, once a year when it's time to get your W-2s. It's 2s out, not 4s, right? 2s out. Mm-hmm. And then where there's, mandatory
But
federal,
it's not every week.
I don't believe so.
Well, we do have certain employees who do receive checks for various reasons, and,
Yeah.
I
Yeah, not everyone
But
does
it's not like
direct
every
deposit.
teacher every week.
correct.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
John?
going back to Jen's point about, do we make a decision about whether it's feasible before we put together the plan as far as cost and budgeting? I mean, that's what we're gonna base on whether we make our decision. So, when you look at the withdrawal meetings from other districts, when you look at what they did, they presented all the information and then, to base their determination on.
So you mean they made a plan and then they decided whether to
Whether
go
it was
with
a
it or
full
not?
plan that was provided to DOE, but there was all the information that they gathered, what the impacts were, and if you look at the RSA, there's a section of what we're tasked with, under A, and then B is putting the plan together and submitting to DOE. And that kind of goes off with what Mrs. Springer brought up earlier is, putting everything together, putting a little bit more time into this, and maybe determining what would be the actual budget cost, what would it look like, and would it be feasible to fund it, and then you decide, is this based off of that budget and the costs? So we'd have to build out what our budget would be like on a single, minus all these extra contractual. What is the overlap costs that we might incur? Like I mentioned earlier, I just said superintendent because we will have, a transitional superintendent coming in as we're switching out. So there might be some overlap costs that you have to put into the Timberlane budget while you have contractual obligations to the SAU current. And then there'll be a transition if out of this office of SAU55, for Hampstead to put it, whatever they're gonna do. So there will be some transition things. I think there's cost involved with that first year possibly, then a recoup of costs after that. So what is that initial cost? Is it worth it? There have been, if you look at other districts, when they've gone through it, they've looked at the cost and said, the cost isn't worth it to us to move forward with the benefits that we get. So the recommendations were based off of the cost that it was gonna be. So right now, we're kind of looking at these numbers. They're not really, how we wanna see it. So I think we need to determine, how should this be presented to us as a budget, and what we want to remove just to see a single district SAU for Timberlane. Without the extra contractual stuff, what would it be year after year afterwards?
Okay, so that's great that you're gonna take that on for us. No, I'm just teasing. No, I think you're right.
That was easier than you
That was
thought.
easier than I think it was.
I second that motion.
I'll delegate to the rest of my budget committee that I'm still waiting for them to.
No, I think it goes back to what I said last time. It's, no, we're not moving forward, or yes, I don't know if I want to, or yes, you know what I mean? I think we have to start building this plan out. I think that's I think we're deluding ourselves by saying we're gonna take a vote maybe without really starting to write a plan. Because other ones, you're right, I looked at other ones and they had written their plan and then they said, no, it's not feasible.
Right.
I think it was.
So then, if you also look, they've done that, they've put it to the voters. Several districts have put it to the voters that it's not feasible. The voters rejected that. They created another committee. The committee came back, said it's feasible, and then they voted and they withdrew.
Yeah,
So we've seen that process in several different
that's-
districts as they've gone through that.
that's true. When you look at the RSA, I think this goes to the voters regardless, does it not? No, and I haven't read that now in a
It
little
will
bit.
go to the voters
It goes
based
to-
off of ours, and the voters can overrule what we say if they still feel that it's,
So I guess we need to move forward with a plan, regardless.
yeah.
I don't know, when looking at the other committees and stuff, I don't know if anyone came across 194C9. It says, would have to disclose the amount of money raised and appropriated, otherwise it's not funded. So I think we have to have
Some sort of number.
some sort of number anyways, because that's in 194C9.
But that's about the plan, correct?
That's about being able to make it happen. We have to. if you
Right,
put-
but that's the plan. But
Yes.
before we get to the plan, this committee needs to vote whether or not we're gonna put together a plan. So
Which is why
that's,
we're here.
well, so that's why I'm struggling with,
Yeah.
so what
I
we're
guess
saying,
I'll-
put together
I
the
guess
plan
I
first,
think
and
we should
then,
do that. I'll make the motion to do that, simply because I don't have enough information right now to say yes, thumbs up or thumbs down.
Can you articulate your motion, please?
Motion to continue.
Make a motion to, I don't know,
Develop a withdrawal plan.
yeah.
I think that's what we're looking to do,
Yeah.
right?
Because to be able to make it feasible, we have to look at the numbers and see it out there. I mean, right now, we're just getting numbers based off of what we have now.
Right,
So
and I
this
don't
is
think we're
worst
getting,
case.
I don't think that's. it's
Madam
being
Chair,
very-
we have a partial motion
Yes.
without a second. Can
I'll
I get some
second.
clarification? So the motion is to develop a withdrawal plan. Did you want to cite any of the basis for that rationale into your motion? for the second, or are you comfortable with just that?
I'm comfortable with just that.
Okay, and that seconded was by?
Sabrina,
Thank you.
is there
Now
any
you can
discussion
talk.
on that motion?
The last two meetings I'll reference.
I mean, I think just, just what John said, is, to be able to make the decision, like, widely by seeing the whole picture, we have to be able to have this number.
Okay,
We have to better understand what it might look like.
Exactly,
It's too
because if
vague
this
right
number
now.
doesn't make any sense, none of the rest of it does.
okay, Jen?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that it is feasible for us to withdraw.
Right.
We
could do it.
feasibly can withdraw. We have the building, we have the SAU staff, we have the schools, our students will stay whole as a Timberlane Regional School District. They will have teachers, we will have busing, so it is feasible to do it, but the question becomes, like
Advisable.
you said, and the only way to determine if it's advisable is to put together the plan, see what that looks like, and then put it to the voters to decide. Yes, they like it, or no, they don't. If it looks like a $2 million plan, I'm pretty confident they're gonna say, no, we don't like it. But I think that's for us to kind of flesh out, so I think I agree with what you're saying, Mark.
And I think just for purposes of discussion, for people who might not have been following along, this is not making a recommendation to withdraw. This is just a.
Continue the research.
Continue to do research and construct a plan.
Yeah, and I believe that at the public hearing, we would also be able to vote as a committee whether that plan, if we want to recommend
If we-
withdrawal
right.
at the public hearing.
That's a good point, John.
After we've had input from we put our information out there, we have a time, just like with our school public hearings on the budget. We look at it, we discuss it, and then we make our recommendation at that point.
Beyond that, if it goes, if that does get put on as a warrant article, the school board and budget committee would also be making a recommendation on that too, I would think, correct?
Definitely the school board, does a budget, I don't
There's a
think.
number, kind of.
Well, there's not gonna be a number on the warrant, though, because
okay.
by RSA, there's no number associated with this warrant.
Right.
Okay.
So I think it would only be the school board that would make that,
Right.
make that vote.
So we as a committee could discuss it at a public hearing, and then when it's on, then the school board would also discuss it as far as what goes on, the recommendation on the actual ballot.
Yeah,
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 okay.
because it's shall the school district, so that would be up to it. The warrant, on the warrant, it goes, shall the school district accept the provisions of RSA 194C, providing for the reorganization of a school administrative unit involving school districts of Hampstead and Timberlane in accordance with the provisions of the proposed plans. Yes or no? That's the warrant article. So I don't think the budget committee would vote, because
Right.
there's no money associated with it.
But it does say proposed plan.
Yeah.
Well-
And the proposed plan is,
One would assume have some numbers.
oh, it has to.
Yeah.
It has to.
I know, but the plan is gonna be presented at the public hearing, but the numbers do not go on the warrant.
They do not. Go.
So, all right, so there's a motion and a second on the floor to move forward with developing a withdrawal plan. Is there any further discussion on that? All in favor?
All in favor?
I'm trying to find something.
Jen, do you have that?
So
Yes, my
much
hand's
paperwork.
up, sorry.
There's my left hand.
Okay, all opposed? The motion carries 6-0. Okay, so we're moving forward with the plan. Okay. Well, let's go back to then some of the other documents that we didn't look at last time, just briefly.
I just had one more on the pro forma budget, the $10,000 for conference and travel expense. Are we still contracted to pay for that? Is that part of the contracts?
No, but this is something that, yes, you have a line in the Timberlane budget for that already, right? But, and there may be some portion of it that there is some obligation to pay. But that issue aside, you would still have additional people traveling and doing conferences and that sort of thing, in addition to what you have right now in the SAU, in the Timberlane budget. So I anticipate that the Timberlane incremental travel and conference would go up by $10,000.
So people from Timberlane, not the SAU, would be using that?
If your superintendent were, or your quote-unquote SAU type staff were at the Timberlane district, they would then be using that.
And do you know if we have a conference and travel expense in the Timberlane budget already?
We have a number of lines for
We
that.
do.
Okay.
But this is solely for those SAU employees. And I would imagine it's only probably 4 employees that use that line.
Actually, if you look at the actuals, it's pretty much
It's pretty much what?
one, and then there's some that get a little bit of it.
Oh, okay. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought here. And so are there any other questions? I do have one other question, because this also pertains to the withdrawal, and I did ask this question of the superintendent, if I could ask this question, because it has not been to the SAU yet. The 2018 SAU audit, could you explain why that audit has not yet been brought before or approved by the SAU board? What is the holdup on that audit? Because that's a pertinent document for the withdrawal committee.
So that document is, well, I was hoping this committee would have some idea as to what their time frame was for withdrawal, if we had an idea of a year in question. There are obligations the other post-employment benefit obligations that would need to be handled somehow on that date. Based on the size of the SAU, we send information to our actuary to have those figures developed. And in connection with the 2018 audit, that work is to be completed. Now, when this came up in March, I said, let me just see if I can get a date, so that while our actuary is doing that work, I can have them maybe come up with where they anticipate that may be in 2000, whatever year it is. I don't really have a date. So I've spoken with our actuary, and I'm having see if we can provide a range of dates and a resolution to how this committee can consider dealing with that liability.
I'm
that's the
absolutely
question to ask.
confused by that.
Well, that,
So could I ask a question? So when did the 2018 fiscal year close?
June 30th,
Of
2018.
2018?
Correct.
And when do audit reports generally come out?
They can come out as early as, I guess, December 31st.
When did the auditors come and do the SAU audit? Because the Timberlane audit was
A
done
while
in
back, yeah.
December.
Yeah, it was a while back. It was a while back. The piece that's missing to that audit is the other post-employment benefits analysis.
But sorry, I don't take this the wrong way, but the vote wasn't until March. The auditors came in December. And I do not think personally, and that we should be asking an actuary to build out something for a hypothetical,
Okay.
something that might occur, and I just don't understand why that audit is being held up for something, for a vote that didn't occur till March, on something where we haven't even decided whether we're moving forward. So there seems to be a time I don't understand the auditors.
Well, you've asked for the reason. I've given you the reason. I'm sorry you don't understand the reason. That liability, that other post-employment benefit obligation is one that this committee should possibly be considering as part of that withdrawal plan and how to dispense with that liability.
But that's from we're talking the close of fiscal 2018 from last June.
Mm-hmm.
And don't we have software that like computes all this stuff? I'm
I wouldn't be sending it to an actuary if it was something that we can.
I don't
Handle
know.
on our own.
I'm just, it just seems strange that most everybody else got their reports out in November, December, and here we are almost at the close of 2019 without an audit.
Okay. I'm expecting it this week. Well, I'm expecting it within the week, if that's helpful.
So,
That is what we were asking.
okay. Jen?
Why is one dependent on the other? So if the audit was done December, let's say the audit was done December 30th, 2018, and then the vote happened, and then you were looking to get this information, couldn't you get it independent of the audit that was already complete?
It would be additional expense, and the audit wasn't complete 12/31. The priority from the Timberlane board was that the Timberlane audit was going to be the audit that was going to be completed by 12/31, and it was. And I don't know that I would have to check the dates that they were out for field work, but I don't think that it was February.
It just feels like two
That's fair.
independent, almost like it would be independent of one another, because in theory, the audit would have, could have, should have, I don't know, been done before a year later.
No, and then we would have to, I would assume, send that data out again to have essentially the same work done to get the numbers that would be needed.
So we're expecting that within the week, so we
Yes.
should have that for our next meeting. Okay, thank you.
And just to circle back, a point of clarification here, and perhaps I had misheard it. My understanding from the conversation was that regardless of whether we give it a thumbs up or thumbs down, it goes before the voters. That's not how I'm interpreting this here. If the planning committee
Can you,
Absolutely.
where are you in here? What
I
page?
am, this is 194 C2, page 185.
Oh, we must have different numbers.
Subsection B.
I've got page 805.
I got page 805?
Wait, 805, yeah.
I'm sorry.
805, okay, 805. Say, where are you on that page?
805.
It's the planning committee, yep.
Right-hand side, last
Okay.
paragraph B. If the planning committee recommends, if they recommend the withdrawal from a school administrative unit, it shall prepare, et cetera, et cetera. However, if not, then it does not continue on. That is my interpretation.
No, because there's somewhere that says if they don't, it goes back to the voters again.
It's back on the front.
If we don't, it's gonna go back to the voters regardless, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you show me where it says that?
It's up on the front. It kind of goes,
Let's go by the page.
I gotta find it again, because it goes out of order. It goes by
Yeah,
if
no,
this, then that, and if
Yeah.
this, then that.
No, it's not on the first page, it just talks about the
I think
committee.
it's on page 803 somewhere. If the planning committee chooses not to recommend reorganization, let me just see where I am. It's on page 803, on the right-hand side.
section C.
Yes.
Okay.
We submitted to the voters of the district to the
Gotcha.
next annual school meeting, which would be March
So regardless,
2019.
it's gonna go back to the voters.
Yeah, the lineup
Okay.
of it is just
Yep.
not,
An English major did not write this.
Okay, so we're moving forward with developing a plan. But I think, just maybe for the public and just for our own committee's edification, we've talked a lot about numbers, but we haven't talked about the qualitative aspects of this. And I think if we go back to the handout that we had last time, that spoke about withdrawal, it's a 2-page, or a couple pages. Jen, Barbara put this together. At the top it says withdrawal. Was it in your packet last time?
Pro-con?
It says pros and cons here. I'd just like to spend, I don't know, 20 minutes discussing this, and then maybe we can I don't know. I'll say 20. Remember, we have school board tonight.
tomorrow.
It's gonna be a late night.
Anyway, so I'd like to talk about this a little, because the people, so after we talk about this, I want to start to think about how we're going to parse out the plan, which unfortunately, I don't know as I brought, I do have one plan, so a withdrawal plan, just so I can kind of look at that as we try to piece this out. So let's look at the pros and cons. One of the thing, Jen, do you want to speak to this, or do you want me to, or Barbara? I don't want to take the floor all the time.
I don't know where you want to start. I mean, I'll speak to,
Well, I think it would be informative to
Well, I would
start
like
at the bottom of page 2, where you
Act-
give the history before we go into,
Didn't we do that 2 meetings ago?
did we do that?
yeah,
Oh, we spoke a
I
little
would
bit.
like
We
to,
went very
I would
briefly
like to
for
jump
place.
around a little bit and talk about the third box down about the lawsuits, because I know that came up amongst this committee since we last met.
So
And
just
understanding that is
read what that, so.
no
for the
lawsuits
public.
from other SAU school districts at a cost to both the SAU and Timberlane Regional School District. So what that means is, right now, Timberlane and Hampstead are together under one SAU. And as such, can sue and be sued. I guess if Timberlane is alone, we can still be sued, but it's unlikely that we'll be sued by another district. right, wrong, or indifferent, if the Timberlane Regional School District is sued by another district, we have an obligation to defend ourselves, and along with that comes legal costs. So if we're alone, we remove that aspect from the picture.
I don't know the answer to this, with the exception of the most recent lawsuit that Hampstead brought against us. In the prior 20, 30 years, have there been others that Hampstead has brought against us, or vice versa?
I don't know the answer to that either.
I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you with certainty that there have been other legal costs associated with the fact that the SAU that we are not a single district SAU. And I can't expound beyond that, but I can tell you there have been legal costs associated with that, both at the SAU and at the Timberlane level.
Yeah, I guess, and
So,
I
not a lawsuit,
recently.
but they're costs. I just want to let you
Right.
know.
And if there were costs from other districts, then, in theory, if we were to stay with Hampstead, that they would help us assume those costs associated as well. So I'm not certain this one is really pro, if it's happened once in 30 years. That's not, for me, that's not compelling. I think that's an immediate concern because of the dynamics we currently find ourselves in. But
Absolutely.
if that historically has not been a problem, I think that is unique to the particular personalities and ideologies amongst various members, which were, unfortunately on display recently. I think that's a one-off. I personally don't look at that as being a pro. There are certainly some pros, but that's not one of them.
I mean, I know that I had asked to discuss this because I have the order here. And to me, looking at
I'm
it,
sorry, what order do you have? Because there have
from the New
been,
Hampshire Superior Court,
for what lawsuit?
the
Because,
Hampstead
the
School
Hampstead.
District
okay, the Hampstead School District versus,
versus when we went with us, this is the one that,
Versus SAU55.
yes,
versus SAU55.
yes.
Okay.
So to me, it looks like it could be something that could have been avoided. So that's why I would say that, it wouldn't be a pro, because this is something that could have been a controlled situation. This isn't like something that happened in a school or something like that. This is something that, had things had been handled differently, it could have been a controlled
There
environment.
won't be an
Can-
ongoing cost
Well,
associated.
let me ask, how do you think it could have been handled differently for the SAU to avoid Hampstead bringing a lawsuit against Hampstead?
I mean,
The SAU.
the way it was written, right, the judge ordered, I just took some notes on it, right? The judge found in Hampstead's favor, right, and ordered all the Timberlane members to attend the next meeting. I think if we have board members, everyone should be showing up and being able to interact as adults with each other. It shouldn't be, asking a chair, to change change himself out and, get into the situation. I think I agree. I think that this could have been avoided.
Yeah, I'm not certain we need to rehash that, this discussion. We saw it, the court made their decision. I don't think we need to rehash all of that right
I don't,
now.
but
If you'd like
but
to.
you should be aware that we're approaching the same situation again. That Hampstead walked out on the SAU meeting last week, and now we're looking at, let's say Hampstead now doesn't want to come to an SAU meeting.
Well,
You're
there's a
saying this is
precedent they'll
one-
be forced to.
Well, it's a
mean-
legal fee. It's another legal fee.
Yeah,
If you want to look, Hampstead also, put
Issued
out
a-
a resolution for,
Correct.
this last meeting, so
What? They put out
they have, this was sent to the school board.
recently?
Yeah.
We don't have it.
We have two members on the school board that haven't seen
I
it.
haven't seen it.
It was sent to the school board.
How did you obtain that?
I found it when I did a Google search, I found it.
Oh,
There
that's not
was,
recent then.
there was a resolution before the
There's
lawsuit.
no date on it?
Let me see if I
Oh,
can find it.
that's
That's
not,
the
that's
original.
not recent.
That's
So
not-
just one point I want to make about that, and I don't want to belabor it because
No.
but I do think, I agree with you, Sabrina, that was completely avoidable.
I do
Had
too.
the chair communicated with our chair rather than just taking us to court. And the decision beyond that, that I had sent to you, clearly said that the judge did not find any bad faith on behalf of the Timberlane Board and thought it was actually, you know, basically a good faith disagreement. And that's why there were no court fees awarded.
Yeah, that's not my interpretation. Again, I'm not a
So-
lawyer, but I don't want to.
That was the second. I don't know if you have the second.
I'm looking at the,
So-
I may not.
In order to
So-
keep this down to 20 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah.
May we just agree that we disagree on that?
Yeah, we may.
But that's fine. We
may
can
do
cross that pro off if that, I
And I
mean,
said, well, what, I disagree with crossing it off. I think that would be up to the majority of the committee. I think who's ever writing
just crossed it off.
the withdrawal. Well, you can also actually go back and, well, in terms of legal fees, well, never mind. Let's
Could I
move
just
on.
change
Let's
the
move on.
subject?
Go ahead. Yes.
So, one of the, I'm very new at the school board. I have no experience with school boards or Timberlane. My question is, how will this impact the students? What are the potential range of impacts to the students should we withdraw?
Marginal.
We do not share curriculum coordinators. We don't, we have no shared,
Shouldn't
Yeah,
affect
the districts
students at
don't.
all.
the districts.
So they're
Yeah,
completely
nothing.
separate and the
Yeah, they're
students wouldn't notice the
educational, yes.
difference.
Right.
There's just no
Education
difference.
is nothing.
Yeah.
That is what I thought, but I wanted to ask.
And some
then-
districts you might have been, and historically, there might have been an impact because the SAUs had more of the management functions of the districts underneath them, but they don't really have that
No, if you
anymore.
look at some of the districts, when they talk about separating, the districts and the teachers, they corroborate between each other, they have, you know, they work together.
Same.
Ours are separate, we don't, our teachers at Hampstead and Timberland don't, really, they don't do anything together, they're not working together. And
that speaks a little bit to that differentiation in that SAU versus district staff. Some of those single district SAUs had curriculum coordinators up as SAU staff. For Timberlane, it was down as district staff because it's not a shared SAU position. If we were all as one, then it would all be globbed, like Kim did, adding those positions up in totality.
Even their transportation separated, although we organize their transportation, they're two separate, like, that's why you'll see the Hampstead buses and the Timberlane buses, although they come out of First Student, they're not, it wouldn't affect our students if we
Okay, so
separated.
the bus routes wouldn't change, nothing.
No, they're not on the same buses or anything right now,
Yeah,
they're
okay.
totally separate, yeah.
Although I'm not sure about, didn't we talk about that with special ed and that transportation? It's a little bit different, I think.
Well, our
Durham.
the SAU transportation coordinator is coordinating transportation for all
Hampstead.
Hampstead
And
and
High
Timberlane.
School.
So all that, I don't think that really impacts the students. We just have to have a transportation coordinator. Whether that,
the only impact of those rare cases where we had, where they used the
Right.
same bus to pick up because it was cost effective. If they're heading in one direction, pick up here and then
With
Hampstead.
Durham.
Right.
Yeah, with the
Right.
Durham services. So there was some cost savings there,
Mm-hmm.
as far as shared ride type of.
but I don't think that would necessarily go away, even if you weren't in the same SAU. If Durham was contracting,
Right,
you know, why wouldn't they want to do that anyway?
right.
Even if it's across district lines.
We just might not see that, say, they might recoup at Durham.
Yeah, Durham will probably yeah, we may not see it. You're
You
right,
know,
you're right.
so-
So there
they'll
could
probably
be a
see it.
marginal increase, but,
They
yeah.
could.
Yeah.
I think when you look at staffing too in some of those job descriptions, transportation is a good point, because we do have the shared transportation coordinator, but then we also have the business operations coordinator who has transportation oversight underneath that job description, along with food services and some facilities.
So, maybe instead of going down pros and cons, just, anybody, I've obviously read this document, and so does Jen, and people had time to review it. Are there questions, or are there things that you think we should add? On the second page, there's also highlights. We looked at themes and differences between the district strategic plans to see if they were the same or if they were different and how they were similar and different. Just to get an idea, because, you know, of the differences and commonalities between the two districts. I don't know if there are any questions on this document. Yep.
Yeah, so starting with the pros, the local control, and again, because I do not have a dog in the fight and I have not been involved with some of the more recent wranglings. The local control, I was charged last week with taking a look recently, and I don't know whether anybody has also pulled that data. But looking at the votes at the SAU school board and trying to see whether, okay, what impact does weighted voting have? How often was the Timberlane School Board's, the will of the majority of its members undermined, or they did not get their way because of the involvement of having a combined SAU, having Hampstead in there. And there were a total of 76 votes, and 73 out of those 76 times, the majority of the Timberlane School Board, whatever the vote the majority went with, they succeeded. So that was a success rate of 96%. Those 3 outliers, it took me some research and a while to understand. I'm sure you're very familiar with this. They ended up being reversed and changed. So in the past year, I could not come up with any time where a majority of Timberlane Regional School Board votes were outvoted by any influence with Hampstead.
What do you consider a majority of Timberlane votes?
A majority of the Timberlane School Board members.
5?
Depends how many showed up, right?
Well, let's say that you had a full SAU board of 14.
Yep.
What do you consider a majority of the Timberlane board?
So of that, so how many from Timberlane, how many, so we're
9.
talking 9?
9.
So in theory, it could be a 5-4 with 100% of Hampstead, and then the majority would have been outvoted. So if you had 5 against the remaining 9, in theory that could happen. It hasn't happened that I'm aware of. And again, you may be aware of more meetings than I
would disagree,
am.
because I can
Take
think
a
of
look.
votes where there were 5 against 9, which would be a majority of the Timberlane board, which is why I'm asking the question as to what you're considering a majority.
So I'm going by the actual votes that were taken. I'm taking these from the minutes, so perhaps I missed a meeting, but I don't think so.
Can I just, I'm not,
So I guess, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
that I don't think, for me, I wasn't looking at that in terms of a motion and a vote, more in
Okay.
terms of, you know,
So can,
issues when the Timberlane Board was trying to get a meeting to address things or issues with the SAU services that the Timberlane Board can't address locally at a Timberlane Regional School Board meeting because the SAU services are managed by the SAU Board. So if we can't get a meeting to discuss it at the SAU Board, then our concerns don't get heard. And if we are in an SAU Board meeting and request to go into non-public about something to address some Timberlane concerns, if it's not on the agenda, if we can't get into a non-public, also our concerns can't be heard. So that is a difficult.
Because in that case, it takes 8 Timberlane board members to go into a non-public session, and that's a large number.
So it's very difficult to address our local problems or concerns or issues or whatever you want to call them when we can't really address it locally amongst ourselves.
Because of scheduling.
No, because it's an SAU function, so it has to be discussed at the SAU board, which only meets a few times a year. And if you want to discuss it sooner, you have to ask the chair to schedule a special meeting and then hope that we have a quorum to show up, even if the chair will call a meeting. So these are some of the things that we run into. And the other thing that we run into is we have employees that are basically working for 3 entities, and we hear quite often that, you know, it can be tricky to do that, to work, you know, this one wants this and this and this, and, you know, trying to coordinate 3 different audits. And as you see now, like the timeline of that, it's a lot to coordinate. And again, I'm only speaking for myself, but when I hear those kinds of things and I look at the employees and I say, God, you know, if I was an employee, I wouldn't want to have to be reporting to 3 different groups either. And I would really appreciate if all of the focus, and maybe this sounds selfish, but could be focused 100% of the time on Timberlane. So that's what that
Right.
That's what
box
I'm saying.
spoke to more for me when I was helping draft some of that, not so much about individual votes.
Right.
Sorry,
Okay,
do we need Mr. Dowd here anymore? I don't think we're gonna have any more budget talk
We actually
tonight.
may when we get to the next one.
Okay, well, then I guess you have
Sorry.
to stay.
I hope you're recording.
Did John have something on that?
John, did you have something on that first one?
No, I was just gonna, so even this last week's SAU meeting, you have so many, Hampstead walked out, and then one member of Timberlane, but we were missing 2 Timberlane members as well, so lost quorum. So,
That's a valid advantage that I can really appreciate that.
so
Yeah.
because we didn't have, even though we had it with weighted voting, you were able to use those 2 missing ones to have the district's votes. It's, for a quorum, you have to have the bodies. And when you have a significant number walk out, like just one district,
Yeah,
you do lose it, but that typically doesn't happen at the Timberlane board where half the board walks out and you lose quorum, you can't continue and get the rest of
That
the
makes
business
sense.
done.
I understand it. I think that is a pro. The way this was worded, suggest it was heading in a slightly different direction, perhaps, especially, regarding recent history, in financial expectations and for consequences of non-performance. That just reeks of being punitive so that we can put the hammer down without Hampstead being involved. That's how I'm interpreting it.
I think the
That's
audit's a
why-
good example of that, though.
Is that?
I think the audit's a good example of that.
The audit is a good example.
I think you need to
Well,
explain that.
I mean, the expectation is that the audit would be when? Like a year later?
Okay, so I am not involved with this, nor will I be involved with this if I think it's going to be a punitive measure to, to settle grievances.
No,
That's
I'm not implying
so-
punitive at all. I'm just saying
And for in financial expectations for consequences of non-performance. I'm interpreting that to be more control so that we can put the hammer down. I've heard from others that have not seen this, that there's that smell in the air, that's, the direction or one of the drivers of this. I don't want any part of that. That's why I'm trying to keep, the personal and the most recent stuff out of it. I don't think it has any place because we're potentially making decisions which will affect our kids and our citizens for decades to come. I don't want any of those decisions to be made with any influence based on what is happening right now in this, myopic view that we are all having with what's happened in the last 6 months or 12
Well,
months.
I resent that. We were talking about the financial management of the Timberlane district, which is done by the SAU. Timberlane has had 2 audits that are less than favorable. That's 2 years. That is not 6 months. We are now sitting here in May of 2019. We don't have the 2018 SAU audit. That, to me, I think, speaks to it's not punitive. It's good board management to have control of the SAU. The business aspect of this has been a concern of Timberlane, not for 6 months, not to be spiteful, not to drop the hammer, but to make sure that we're doing as a board in the best interest of our students and our taxpayers that we can. That's what that's about. And I've only been sitting on this board for 2 years, and all I've seen is 2 years of audits that have me very concerned.
And Mark, just for the record, because I am here, the Timberlane Board requested the audit be completed December 31st. The audit was completed December 31st.
Repeat that?
It's not.
Tim-
It was done.
Timberlane.
Timberlane audit.
Okay.
Audit, which is a much bigger audit than the SAU audit, the Timberlane audit. So now if everyone's going to say, well, we have an SAU, we want local control on that, well, that's an SAU issue. I have the SAU chair right in front of me. Call a meeting whenever you want. You have a majority of your board, you can do, so the Timberlane audit, if you want local control over Timberlane board requested the audit be completed for 12/31. That was a priority of that board. I heard that priority as an SAU employee. That audit was complete December 31st, just for the record.
Now, I guess,
Thank you.
I guess
Because
what-
I was not aware of that history, and that is enlightening. Thank you.
I guess what could probably better explain the combination of like the SAU and being able to get a board meeting and being able to non-go public. Do we have a breakdown of how many times like going non-public was denied at these meetings, or how many times the meeting was denied for a special meeting to have things discussed? I guess that would probably better break it down.
You'd have to go, I mean,
I have to dig through.
you'd have to go through Timberlane board meetings, minutes where Timberlane was requesting special meetings. You'd have to go through, some of those might have been initiated out of non-publics. I don't recall.
I'm just saying, like,
It's
if
not it's not gonna be an easy.
Some of it is an email, like if three
Right.
Timberlane board members ask the chair for a special meeting, and that's not something that would necessarily be discussed at a meeting, calling for a special meeting, because that's the problem, we don't meet often enough to be able to
Right.
call a meeting.
But that's
So
what I'm saying, like, because I think like what
it was quite a bit last year.
There is like
I've
if
only
we're
been on the board
asking
for a year, and it was quite a bit last year.
on going non-public as well.
Well, we couldn't have any,
we
we
couldn't get
didn't
it.
have any meetings, so we didn't go into non-publics.
No meetings?
No, we,
Well,
No special
well,
meetings.
No special, right. We had very few meetings.
we did have
so,
very few meetings. It felt like a lot.
And
but-
one of the issues that we had was, we felt that we needed to hire, Timberlane felt they needed to hire a consultant to assist Timberlane in business operations. We were trying to get that heard at the SAU level, because it's an SAU function, and we're not able to. I wasn't around, so I'm a little vague on how this all went down. But Timberlane has a consultant for the business side of the house that Timberlane is paying. This is not a Timberlane operation, it's an SAU operation.
I think that was a non-public motion that failed at one point. I don't think you were at that meeting, but I think that was early on. Maybe
Well, that could have been a case where,
September or in the summer or something. I
So
don't recall.
I would say, so we not just
Yeah.
keep going down this.
Yeah.
Again, if you look at a lot of the schools that have gone through the withdrawal, it seems like when you get to a certain size and you're paired with a smaller district, and you have this second level that you have to go in for part of your administrative management, that it becomes somewhat cumbersome, because now you have to get two separate boards to agree to meet on a certain day.
I'm comfortable with that language. I'm
And-
comfortable with the core philosophy. I'm
Yeah.
uncomfortable with the way it's written now.
Which is, ignore that whole first part without that second part, if you put it there. Local control is one of the factors, and there are many of the districts, when they put their withdrawal information together, they have something similar to this,
right.
where they have pros and cons. And local control is a big piece of that, whereas they can focus on their district, they can have the SAU staff, the superintendent, focused on their district, and that's more local control. They're more involved in it, as opposed to having, again, when we ask, because we're combined, we don't know, with the way that the SAU works, we don't know how the mix is with how much. I mean, we could be getting 90% of the work of the SAU staff working for us, and 10%, but they're paying 23 and we're paying 76. We don't know how that works out.
Right.
If it is, we'll know that that staff is dedicated to our district, the whole staff, and we could have that focus on it. And that's where the local control and that kind of focus piece comes in, with a lot of districts. And if you look at the sizes and the breakouts of them, it's all a large district that gets to a point where they want that control and focus on their own district.
I see that as a pro. I can get behind that.
Can
I
I
see that as
suggest
a
a
pro.
language change here? Because I didn't,
Sure.
when we put this list together, I wasn't looking at this, it was kind of a quickly put together, in less than a week.
Right.
And I wasn't looking at this as something that would be part of a formal plan. But if we're talking about a formal plan and language, I would suggest maybe after that parentheses, that last sentence, say leaders in SAU will be directly accountable solely to TRSD educational and fiscal expectations, period. Does that summarize and make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And one other point is, I don't think Plastow voters, our town voters, we don't get to approve the SAU budget, we can only approve the Timberlane budget, is that correct?
Well, yes, there was a warrant that the SAU budget was pulled out for separate approval. I think it was 2016, then there was another warrant that put it back in. So yes, you have, the towns right now have no control over, there's no separate vote on the SAU budget, and there's no default budget for the SAU. And I think if you look at Karen's data, you'll see that the cost of the SAU seems to be, whereas if you look at other parameters and try to mirror those, it does have a different flavor, so.
Yeah. So whereas in a single district with a budget committee, the budget committee would form that as part of it. The school board would have the default, all of those would fall under each of those.
And the voters would have a voice.
Yes.
Yes, as now it's the SAU board does the budget. And it goes in as a line item that we have no,
Into both budget, into the default budget at the same,
we can't even subtract that, we can't minimize that at the Timberlane level because it's at the board level. So voters can't touch that at deliberative, whereas
And that's another aspect of local control.
right.
so I guess we could put that there's no standalone SAU budget as,
As a pro?
well, as a con.
con, okay.
A pro would be if we were single district, we would
Yeah.
have,
Although that is at the control of Timberlane to put it on a warrant article and switch it, the voters could change that.
Well-
It has happened, so
it has happened,
it's controlled by us, the voters chose not to,
right.
so.
But that takes a,
Yeah, there's a majority vote and there's probably that.
so are we putting that as a con?
Hmm?
Are we putting that as a con then?
For
Currently, it
withdrawal?
is a con. I mean,
Well, but
no, the current,
so the pros are
Oh,
pro
the-
withdrawal, right?
yeah.
That was one
Yeah,
thing that
okay, so I
kind
guess
of-
that would be
Yeah.
why you would want to go. We would,
This depends on the wording, which side of
I know.
the page you put it on.
okay, so maybe SAU budget. This is a draft document. Who's ever working on that section is going to have to do this, so. Any other questions on these pros and cons on here?
Well, did you have something for Jeff, Phil, Mark?
Oh, I think,
Mark, on the next one.
We'll probably end up getting that. I'll skip the next one for now. Cost level of service under the pros. I'm not certain we've determined that. That's what this whole process is about. I don't think that should be under pro. That should balance between both pros and cons. We're trying to figure out whether the cost, the taxpayer cost in a level of service provided is justified or not. Yeah, so I'm not certain
that's
why
kind, I
that should
think
be
that's
under
kind of
pro.
up there on the con side too.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of.
Reviewing the economies
so
of
we
scale.
don't really know.
So that's a question mark.
And Barbara, I think your point about the SAU budget is in the box just above that. Fiscal responsibility for SAU
Oh,
budget
yeah.
returns to district voters as part of the.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah. so
Thank
that's
you.
in there. It's okay.
You read that.
So, Mark, what,
It actually, I was,
I'm trying to ask
Yes.
a question of Jeff so he can,
Well, while we're on that, are you talking about like these vendor contract obligations and shared services? Is that what you're thinking about falls under
no,
there?
actually, no, we can move on. Good for right now. We're good. Are we going to be discussing it all after this? Your draft,
draft of what?
the draft budget, is this one old or two old?
It's not
I
my-
blew it up, this wasn't,
It's not my
Oh,
draft
that-
budget.
Oh, that's Karen's.
That's
That's
Karen,
Karen's.
that's
The one that
Karen.
used to be purple?
the ones that used, yeah, I don't have colored ink at home, sorry, guys.
Oh,
Sort of what you
okay.
is this the one, but
That's-
didn't you get this last week?
Okay, do it, but we're
Yes.
trying to find if anybody else has questions
For
for
Jeff,
Mr.
Not a-
Mark,
Dowd.
Mark, you don't have?
I have some questions.
Or do you?
If we're looking at moving forward with the plan, there's a lot of question marks on this shared services that I think we're gonna need to start looking at, getting some clarification on. Safe schools pending, I don't know why is that pending?
We haven't moved forward with the program yet.
What's that?
We haven't moved forward with the program.
Okay.
So when you say cost savings, that, I was talking to Jen about this, on these shared services from May 7th, do you have that, Jeff?
I'll dig it out.
It says cost savings and it says savings likely. I'm not really sure what that means. Is that savings are likely because we're combined, or savings are likely should
Because
we?
we're combined.
Because so there's you think there are likely savings with the two being combined?
Right, so we haven't gone out necessarily and priced things out separately, but Durham Services, you talked about that, cost savings highly likely, total savings uncertain. It certainly helps to be able to have that direct ability to coordinate trips for those students, and as a result of that, one full cost ride may turn into a ride split 3 ways, or at least in half, things like that.
Okay. Jenny?
So, for these vendors, is there, and for these, benefit strategies, claims funding, Omni Group, NutriKids, can we find out from these vendors if there's, like, what's the cutoff? Because in my mind, I feel like Timberlane is large in size on its own.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a cutoff for NutriKids, let's say 5,000 students versus 3,000 students? Like,
Are there tiered discounts?
yes, thank you, Mark, yes.
So I think our biggest tiered discount, if you will, or combined district discount, if you will, is first student. And we had not had Durham Services priced out in that way, which is our special education, our special transportation service. But first student cost savings there, Timberlane $613,700 over 5 years, Hampstead $400,000, $10 over 5 years. So that's something that, you get that economy of scale. What is that tiered, discount level there?
But we're
No.
right now currently in the 1 year of a 3-year or 5-year contract with first students?
It's 3 with 2 additional year options.
Okay.
Yep, so that's why I put that out there in the
So
5 years.
that's looking pretty far out.
Right.
But as far as time clock plus, like you said, what's the cutoff? 100 employees versus 500 versus 700?
So on some of these, I'm looking to get more specific. For example, Tyler, we've had to have a conference call, the Director of Technology and myself have had to have a conference call with them, and they're at the bottom of page 2 to really try and ascertain what that's going to look like, because sometimes you're talking about a tiered, maybe a volume discount based on number of students, based on, the volume of employees or whatever it may be. So really, I'm working now to get an idea as to what that's going to look like. In some cases, there is a definite, threshold. In other cases, there's not, and you just have to say, what would this relationship look like if it were split out 2 ways?
I think that looks like all of that looks like it might be a little bit of work, that I just think if we're going to look at a plan, that we should get started on that sooner rather than later so that we can understand that.
And,
Right.
How easy is it to export and possibly change software vendors on some of these if we decided to?
It depends on the application. So for example, NutriKids works in our schools. It works with our, so we have hardware and technology in the schools, in the cafeteria lines. We also have the infrastructure on myschoolbucks.com for any of our lovely parents who funded their students' lunch account. You know where that is. So we have different aspects of it. Would there be something that would fit both of those? That's the question. Would there be something that would fit, both myschoolbucks.com, if you want to change or keep that as a platform, plus our technology, if we have to change our hardware in the school, then you'd be looking into different costs. So it really is
So
speculative.
you're saying some of these are interconnected?
Interconnected with our district, not necessarily with Hampstead's, no. No.
Sabrina?
So on these contracts, right, how does this fare if we split? Are these contracts written to SAU55, and do we have to start all our own contracts, all new? Like, who do these contracts stand with if we split?
So as a general proposition, benefit strategies would be through, we don't pay an awful lot to them anyway. That's one that's, I believe, with SAU Durham and First Student. That's going to be with the individual districts.
So would our contract still stand? Like,
Yep.
I think you said 1 of 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So would that still stand if we were not SAU 55 anymore?
Correct.
It
Yeah,
would
we-
still be
we don't
binding
have-
into the new one?
Transportation services are separate with the districts. Food services are separate with the districts.
No, but I'm saying like, just like as a whole, like these contracts
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
have, if we're
right.
no longer SAU 55, do we have to start a new set of contracts with people?
Well, I think at the SAU level, it would be nice to, and when we meet again, or I may ask for this, actually, I would like this from this, but could you tell me when each of these contracts is due? Because I think it speaks to your question. If these are annual contracts, then if we withdraw,
It doesn't.
it's gonna, it
Well,
doesn't
that's-
matter. But if
yeah.
it's a 5-year contract,
I can go
so are
through-
these all annual?
I think we'll go through them right now. Benefit strategies claim, that's,
There was the next page, actually says annual rolling on most of these.
Oh,
So
I guess it's-
SAU vendor contractual obligations. This one right here.
so they're all annual, so I guess that answers that question.
with the exception of those that we discussed, Durham and First Student, which are each with the districts individually.
Oh, it's on the other.
So now if they're rolling and we have to start them anew as a new SAU, are there any costs associated with that?
There could be, yeah, there will be.
Yes.
Just like you start a new contract with Comcast, it isn't necessarily the same as what you.
Be getting a
locked
better
in.
deal then.
Yeah, sometimes
Only
you
at
get
the
the first 6
grandfathered
months.
price. Do we get the grandfathered price?
Yeah, but if we're starting new, like how does that fall in? What's it gonna be, cost-wise, if we have to start, 10, 15 new contracts? Do we have an idea of what that?
I don't think that it's a vast amount. I think that you have some inherent costs, somewhere on the vendor. So, right, so for example, LGC Health Trust, that would be on them in a way to separate out the plans in the districts. They're already separated out. It's just that some of our plans are pooled, if you will. So, but each district, I suppose, could take that plan with them, and that's gonna be a cost that's gonna be on their end. Omni Group, there may be, I don't think there would be anything substantial. NutriKids, really that works with the individual districts anyway. There may be a volume or discount that we receive as a result of that relationship. Primex, they send 3 bills, right?
Is our hardware a lease, or do we own that in the individual schools? Like, do we have to change our hardware?
On NutriKids?
It just, in general, like anything, we use software that's compatible throughout the district, would we have to switch any of that? Is
Any
it like
dedicated
a-
hardware?
Again, if you use
Because it
Comcast,
was
if
licensed
you have
under
the
55, and
yeah,
now it
if
could
you
be
have,
155.
modem, you gotta change your modem back in if we use the Comcast, thing. Do we have any leased products that we would have to, turn back
Punch
in and
clocks.
restart? Yeah, time clocks.
No, we
anything
don't
that-
use time
We
clocks.
have the swipe,
Okay.
yeah.
So we do have the,
Time clock plus.
no, it's not an actual time clock.
No, it's just software.
Software, that's right.
So it's no,
NutriKids, if you wanted to switch the platform on that, I guess you could. I don't know that, you'd necessarily lose a huge discount buying individually, or it would cost you any more buying individually. I don't really see too much. Tyler, that could be a problem. But aside from that,
What is Tyler?
Tyler's our enterprise resource solution. Enterprise, it's general ledger, HR.
Are you aware offhand of any potential penalties that we could incur simply by changing ownership, other than?
I question, I'm not sure. So for example, if, just food for thought, theoretically, if Hampstead, if Timberland were separated from SAU55, Hampstead would then be would be the custodian of those records, if you will, right? And so what is the
Which are
on?
we speaking of?
SAU 55 goes with Hampstead.
Okay,
So they-
that's right.
Hampstead would be the custodian, if you would, of those records, would be under an obligation to maintain those databases for historic purposes, for audit purposes, and that sort of thing. So what's the cost of that? Whether it's an obligation or not, it's not, whether it's a contract or not, they still have to maintain
There's enough goodwill, they'll just assume it.
that data. It could be expensive, yeah. Could be, it seems like there's a lot of goodwill, so.
That's an interesting question, Jeff, because some district, or some SAUs that have separated have completely dissolved if they've each gone with a separate I can't think of one off the top of my head, but if they had each gone.
With the
if they-
new SAU.
Correct, with the new SAU, then who maintained that original historical?
I hope
That's an interesting question.
someone's maintaining it, and I would imagine that there may be some horse trading or bartering or something that goes on during that mutual withdrawal process, wherein someone would have ownership of that, information. Somebody has to have that for, for purposes of audit and view and all of that at a later point.
Well, I would think if we move towards that point, and if a vote's taken and Timberlane were to withdraw, that is something that would be discussed with Hampstead, because probably by that point, they're gonna be thinking about what they're doing, as to whether or not they're maybe going into another SAU or not, so.
There's been
I would-
one instance where a withdrawing district requested that they get to keep the SAU,
Records?
the SAU itself. They wanted to keep the SAU number and
Oh, that's interesting.
because of emails and everything that's already out there associated and stuff. So they actually have requested, which basically is like, we want to leave, but we want to keep it and kick you out.
Yeah, well, we're not going that.
No, but
that-
that's-
I don't think that's gonna work.
It's interesting how people try and keep these things going
Right.
and keep ownership of certain things because of that, say they did have a large pool of licenses that were paid and it would be a large cost, and then a smaller district might not utilize that software if they leave. So, there could be an instance where I guess we might even be able to transfer that ownership of the existing at a cheaper, a lower cost to us than purchasing outright if Hampstead chooses not to use that software for some of these contracts.
I would think each district, honestly, from an onus and accountability moving forward point of view, each district would want to maintain their own information,
So when we had the discussion about Pelham and Wyndham splitting,
yeah.
so I researched that, and that was lost along that separation between who maintained what records of data.
That's why we can't find that withdrawal plan. John can't find it. It's
It
just,
goes to a broken link that pointed to their old SAU, and somebody must have come along and removed anything related to the old SAU when they became the new SAU, and so it's not out there anymore. They don't have the records at Wyndham. Pelham doesn't have the records because it was.
They said, "We're done with
Wyndham
this."
thing. So again, that record keeping and tracking is going to be.
It is important, yeah.
An issue of making sure the right data gets moved around and maintained.
And to give you an idea, New Hampshire retirement system, for example, when a person retires, if they've been involved in the system for a long time, often has questions and we get them now. I mean, we're not necessarily able to keep all of our data
Right.
in perpetuity, right? We do try and maintain those records as long as we can. We have requests going back 10 years to 2009 or before.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, when someone is looking to retire and New Hampshire retirement system says, hey, we see that they've been in the system for 20 years, but we'd like to know in, 17 years ago, what was this payout or what was this payment, or this doesn't quite make sense now that we're setting them up in the retirement system, for example. And we get those requests a number of times a year, and I would imagine it would be the same thing for SAU.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, you really can't like split it up amongst the districts and say, well, you take this and I'll take that, in terms of the data and, the responsibility of it. You really need to have someone own it, and there's a cost to owning it, because, for example, if Timberlane split, maybe Hampstead doesn't go with Infinite Visions, but the SAU55 data right now is on Infinite Visions. So I don't know what other sort of data, I don't know where else we could park that data.
That would be up, we're withdrawing, so that would be up to Hampstead to handle. I don't think Timberlane's gonna take on the SAU 55 data, especially if there's a cost associated. I certainly don't see why we would do that.
But
What
there's-
would that do to all the current SAU?
We are withdrawing.
yeah.
It ceases to be our responsibility, in my mind. I mean.
As
it
long as
could
we
be-
get our Timberlane data
Yeah,
out of it. And it's
Well, I know it's easy to, say, well, we're done, we're walking away. I'm not sure how the Department of Ed's gonna feel. I assume that they're gonna wanna make sure that if someone is withdrawing, that things are tidy in terms of the financial obligations or responsibilities going
And that's
forward.
part of the plan that they approve.
Right.
So
Right,
they
no one's-
either
I have
approve
not-
the plan or they kick it back to
I
us.
have not
and we-
seen that level of detail in these plans.
I-
And then you see
Have you?
situations that
I have
Pelton,
not. I've not seen that in these plans.
no one seems to know where the data is from Pelton. I mean, this is not helpful. This is stuff that
No.
we see and say,
I
well, we
think
need
that
to
might be a
address
good
it.
question for legal counsel, too.
Yes, I'm gonna ask legal
Yeah,
counsel about that.
Along with, I think the bulk of this pro forma, from what we keep discussing, is contracts.
Right, and those contracts have been sent to legal, so I do need to have a discussion with legal. Okay.
So I did have a question for Mr. Dowd. So, in the audits for 2016 and 2017, the significant deficiencies, one was mentioned that the reconciliations do not happen every month, and they ended up happening almost months, almost at a yearly level.
Okay.
Are you currently on monthly reconciliation? Do you have monthly reports?
Yes,
Okay, so you are up to date
correct.
and so the audit for 2019 will be in a timely manner, you anticipate?
I would anticipate, but I don't know that that necessarily had anything to do with reconciliations. The finding was made in the very first year that I took over in that capacity. And obviously with some staffing changes and shifts that had happened and taking time to develop processes and procedures and having those in place, by the time they were addressed, we were almost through the second audit, through the 18 audit at that point. So it was difficult for them, for audit, to say, well, you know, we know that you've got processes in place, but we just don't really have a full data set to be able to compare that to.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the 2018 audit should show, well, in the 2018 Timberlane audit, it still had the mirrors.
It still
from-
had it, but it was mostly a function of really not being able to pull that data.
So you currently do not have any obstacles to getting monthly reconciliation?
Correct. Yeah, we've updated processes and procedures, and those are out. In fact, even monthly revenue and expenditure reports are sent out now as well.
Those are all posted up on the SharePoint site.
No. Well, the 2018 Timberlane we are still waiting for the SAU55 2018 audit report.
The audit, I'm talking about the expenditures.
Oh, the
and
expenditures, okay.
All of that is posted online every month
Oh, good,
for each of the,
thank you.
several
Yeah.
were posted today for the PAC and the general. The expenditures were posted, or yesterday. There were a couple posted up.
Oh, those might have been maybe vouchers, but.
Yeah.
I posted those today, but you
Yeah.
did the monthly thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, with those, okay, I see. So,
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I
We're
think
good?
we're all
Thank you.
set on that. I'm getting ready to try to wrap some things up
Yeah.
here. So we've made a vote to move forward. We've discussed the pro forma budgets as they were presented. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
So I think what I think we need to do is think about how we're gonna write the plan and how we're going to parse out sections. I'm not, that different people on the committee, and then start to bring that back. 2 weeks maybe, I think 2 weeks is a good time frame for people to get a start on it. Obviously, we're not looking to have a draft by then.
Right.
But in 2 weeks, you could start to work on it, and then we have more questions. So I guess we need to, and I don't think I can do this right now, I think the best thing would be to do is to have, say, the outline of the plan. I have 2 withdrawals here. You know, typically you get, there's usually history, the district overviews, the process that was followed, then they give an overview of the SAU, the benefits of withdrawing, then you have to look at the impact on other districts, which is minimal. I don't
We
think-
have a letter in here as well from
you're-
Hempstead.
Did you see the
Yes,
Hampstead letter?
no,
So we do have a-
no,
It is in here in the red packet.
We do have a letter from Hampstead in the packet,
Packet, got
just
buried
talking
in my other
about
stuff.
when they will provide
Hang on,
their impact,
Wait.
possibly.
Lattice appropriate.
Yeah.
This letter is at the Hampstead.
So they're basically saying after we've submitted our plan, either at public hearing or DOE, then they will let us know.
So Hampstead says
Just make assumptions about what they
the
could
board's
do.
position is that the Hampstead School District will continue to look at all options pertaining to this potential withdrawal, and as such reserves the right to submit an impact statement after the Timberlane School District, by way of the Withdrawal Planning Committee, submits its withdrawal plan for a public hearing and/or to the Department of Ed.
It's late in the game.
Well, as I said, I have spoken to legal counsel. I don't think that's really late in the game. My understanding is that when this goes to a public hearing, that many times there's legal representation from all districts involved in the SAU. So I'm not even making any allusions as to what Hampstead's thinking of doing, but my guess would be that they will have some counter to our plan or some maybe objection, or maybe they'll be happy, and that they'll bring that forward to DOE, and they're under no obligation to do that until it's sent forward.
And that
until the
public
plan's
hearing
written.
has to be notified in all districts, just like
Right.
this meeting is, so I assume that they all can attend because they have to all be notified.
Yeah, so they're basically just saying they're gonna wait till the plan's written, and then they're going to maybe write an impact statement if maybe they disagree with ours, or, so, that's all. That's basically saying that we really won't get any information.
They're not interested in collaborating. I guess you could take it that way. Jen?
I don't know that they really need to. I'm just quickly looking at the, this RSA and the reorganization and what the plan needs to contain. You're talking about, prepare an educational and fiscal analysis of the impact on the school districts. Estimate the construction and operating costs of operating such school or schools. Some of these things I don't think really are going to apply to us because we're not in a situation where we're looking to build new schools to support withdrawing from the SAU. We're not in a situation where we're looking at educational impact to our students of leaving one high school, let's say, and joining another high school. So I think those portions of the plan should be pretty easy
They're gonna
to
be
put
very
together.
easy, Yeah.
Take that.
No,
I know, I was gonna raise
no,
my
you don't
hand.
get that one. That's mine. I'm the chair, I get the easy one. So anyway, so I guess back, I don't know. So impact on other districts, I get waylaid. Plans for support services, cost to the school district, educational impact, that's the easy one. And then the fiscal analysis, which is probably the most challenging, because you're gonna have to make some suppositions as to where we go. So I don't know if we want to kind of assign things now. So I see history and enrollment as kind of a, district overview, SAU overview, that's a big piece. Obviously, the financial impact, fiscal analysis is a big piece. Benefits, so I guess there are maybe 3 big pieces, and then some of the other ones would fall underneath that. Not fall underneath it, but those are gonna be relatively easy to write.
Yeah, and some of there's gonna be, because right now, we're, like superintendent and several, they have contracts that have certain stipulations of bonuses that have yearly cost to them, and that we won't be part of that. We'll just have to figure out what's the start. We won't be part of negotiations of contracts and what comes along with them, and how many, like all those pieces there that Jeff grouped together for the, sick and vacation buyouts, incentives, extra hours.
Yeah.
That was $71,000 extra in the budget that isn't tied to salary. So, so there's some of that stuff that we still don't have, understand per
employee,
per
well,
employee
hopefully
right
we'll
now.
have that for the next time, so.
Right.
Obviously, we can't get that all done, but
Nope.
I think who's ever taking that portion is gonna have to think about what would the new SAU look like, and what would, kind of like what Jen kind of broke it out. I guess we'd be looking at what employees would we still have or retain, and what don't we? So
Right.
right, so, I don't know, I know Karen's not here, but, so are we gonna try to parse this out? I think we should try to parse it. I think Karen should definitely be involved in the fiscal analysis, because she's already done,
Yeah, she has that.
I don't know if you wanna help out with that, John?
Yeah,
Because you're
absolutely.
budget committee?
Yep.
Maybe the two of you can work on that, she's due back, but.
I was gonna ask Mark if he would be willing to work with me on this piece of it. Just maybe we could take that
Yeah.
offline and set up a time to talk or meet
You
or
bet.
whatever and go through some of this.
So like the
What-
staffing needs.
Yeah.
Right.
What, but isn't that really part of what,
Well,
the staffing is gonna drive?
But, I mean, just as far as looking at, job descriptions, positions, functions, how,
Okay.
how the SAU services could be.
Where are the potential savings?
Yeah.
Where's the overlap? How do we compare? We need to get a better feeling as to how everybody else is existing and surviving and working to help
exactly.
determine how we can.
I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, we're
We know we
calling
have
that
to
what-
provide SAU services. What
a
are some?
plan for the support
What are some
services.
possible scenarios of what that might look like?
Okay,
Superintendent,
I have staffing needs. That's basically what that part is, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
staffing part.
plan for support services or the staffing. Okay, so that's Mark and Jen, and then,
history.
So theirs is more staff, whereas Karen and I will actually look at the numbers in a spreadsheet,
right,
kind of look at how does that, if that.
I don't
the-
plan on looking at any salaries or
you know,
budgets or.
Yeah, so, but if we're looking at, I'm imagine we would be looking at state averages and things like that to base salaries on.
yeah, and I think she has a lot of that
Yes.
already.
Yeah.
So that'll be good. And Barbara, you want to work on the history
Yeah.
enrollment parts of it?
History enrollments, define
This-
that.
Well, I just looked
What
at
the
somebody
projected
else's,
student enrollments? What do you-
yeah, I think
I'm
it's,
They,
I think
they
I,
usually give a past enrollment and projected enrollment and, the history of the district and.
right.
That
Yeah, what's the
often ties
enrollment?
into the educational
I actually
impact
may
and how
have
they're
that
going to
file
educate,
already.
which for us is.
Pretty much stays on
We've
track.
got the easy part.
How the SAU came to evolve.
But I did start doing history already, okay?
I mean, there's another section which is
But I'll have
Which
to help
is-
on something else too.
benefits of withdrawing. Some people put that in. Looking for a volunteer. Or the process of the committee.
Because
Benef-
I'm last.
I mean, I'm happy to help you do that. I'm trying not to take a too big a role because somebody is going to then have to, doing strategic planning at the college where I work, everybody writes their section and then somebody essentially rewrites it so it makes, a grammatical continuity to it. So I'm trying not to give myself too much work because I'm hoping to pull it together and then try to
Yeah.
Make
maybe
it-
You'll compile it.
compile it.
Wave the
So,
magic wand.
So under the benefits, what are some of the?
well, some of those would be in that list of pros and cons. Some people do it in tabulated form. Some people do it in narrative form. It kind of depends
Okay.
on what you're more comfortable with in
I
terms
don't
of.
remember which withdrawal plan. One of the withdrawal plans that we have a link to, actually, their members of their committee went out and called different districts that withdrew to ask, now that you've been through this,
Yeah.
how do things look a year, 2 years later? Would you do it again? Do you have any regrets? Not saying that you have to go through that whole process and recreate the wheel, but looking at what
What they got for research.
what they got,
Yeah,
yeah,
what
what
people-
for,
Gotcha.
See whether it resonates with our situation.
Yeah, and a lot of these plans do have benefits that they speak to that maybe we haven't addressed yet or we haven't thought of, so that's a good place. Karen did provide a list of SAUs that have split within the last 5 years or so, so if you're gonna call, you might wanna call up those, because those would,
I have a contact at DOE. I reached back out to, she asked me to touch base with her. She was gonna get me the name of a couple of people that she knew served on some withdrawal committees, both that have withdrawn and not withdrawn. I left her a voicemail yesterday. I didn't hear back from her today, so if I get some contacts from her, I'm happy to share them with you.
Awesome, thanks.
And I'm in touch with, so Adam Steele was the business administrator of Wyndham during
Okay.
theirs. And I've got some questions out to him. We had some emails going back and forth, and that could be easily one that I could,
Awesome.
when I touch base with him again, I could ask him the experience. I asked him what the experience, what was the drivers, what were his experience after. So, and I did see that as well. And most of I think all the districts they reached out to that went through it, they were happy with it, and they wouldn't go back, and they thought it was a positive thing, so it'd be interesting if we hit others other than those ones.
In my brief conversation with the Department of Ed, she said she would be curious for me to reach back out to her just to hear periodically how things are going with this committee. She said she was curious about what we found or uncovered that we shared as far as services that maybe we hadn't thought of or didn't realize. She said she felt like for districts that chose not to go forward with withdrawal, that was the biggest driver, was that there were so many shared services, vendors, costs, that it just didn't make sense for them. When I look at what we have presented to us as shared, it doesn't look that cumbersome.
We're not as entangled.
We're not, right, and I think the biggest part of that is our students and our teaching staff and our buildings are completely separate, so there's not all of that to kind of untangle, right?
So what I'm gonna do is I'll do a section on process, which will just speak to the formation of the committee, so on and so forth, and just how many times we met, and just, because that will be continuing.
Right.
And then I also gonna want to probably start, I'm gonna form a table of contents. Some people did, some people didn't. I was very impressed with Newport's study, that's SAU53.
Yeah.
I just like the way that they broke it down to make sure that they addressed every point in the RSA. So,
It was much easier because I was looking for something specific, and I just
I know,
go down to page
yeah,
24.
right, so you can go, so I'm gonna start to build the table of contents just to have it. I don't know, Kathy, maybe we should have this discussion offline, how much support you provide. I'm not wonderful about formatting and those sorts of things, and, we do want it to kind of look professional when we send it up to the
Do
DOE.
your headings right, should work. Well. But you're the master of.
So, some committees added all their minutes, we could end up with quite a thick report here because of some of the background data that we have too,
Yeah.
so, like the minutes probably all need.
Yeah, that's not a question I'm comfortable answering.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, we'll have a,
Yeah.
You talking about actually putting it together in a format?
yeah. That may be something that our board needs to discuss too.
That sounds like a Karen Steele job.
Why she's not here, she'll
Do
learn
we have
not
an
to.
ink budget?
Yeah, in budget.
She'll make sure she doesn't miss another meeting.
We
Cut her
didn't
down
make you
to 2
chair.
colors.
You almost lost out the first night.
I saw that, and I appreciate the support, Mark, but I was watching the live
Your
stream,
check
I'm
still
like,
hasn't
oh, what's
cleared.
gonna
What the
happen?
Cut out the colors.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's cleared. So our next meeting is the 28th. At that meeting, we should bring, I don't think we scheduled too many meetings beyond that. I don't remember now.
2 more.
We're only
June,
going
more.
through
June.
So we should bring your calendar so we can schedule more meetings. I think we're gonna be in a good place to hit our timeline to go for a public hearing in August, so.
Do you mind if I just do a quick review of what the responsibilities are? History and enrollment, that was Barbara. The financial input was Karen and John. Benefits to withdraw was Sabrina with Kim's assistance. The process was Kim, and the table of contents was Kim. Excuse me, I missed one. Staffing was Jen and Mark.
Right, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
that's what I have. Okay. Any other questions?
And then we have on the list that Mr. Jowd was gonna look at some of these,
Contracts?
thank you.
The contracts, and then he's also gonna provide that breakout
Yeah.
for the last 4 years of benefits.
I mean, not that and I'm not really expecting an answer next week on all of that, but just to kind of get that moving in the right direction, yeah.
And two housekeeping things. I just want to remind people on the committee, please do not send emails to the entire committee, because that constitutes a quorum. if you have questions, please send them to me, and if things need to go out to the committee, then it should go through the chair. And then the other thing is, likewise, if you need anything from the SAU, please direct the question to me so that I can direct it to the appropriate SAU staff. It will just make everybody's life a little bit easier so that they're not being asked from multiple people, so. Again, anytime the whole board is on an email, it becomes a quorum and it's subject to 91A, and especially if you reply back to it, so. All right, thanks, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Got our work cut out for us.
Work cut out
Nine
for us. Oh, yes.
16.
9:16.